In 2004, a former North Korean prison camp guard sat across from BBC reporters and described something that would haunt the world. Glass-walled chambers, entire families forced inside, scientists taking notes as poison gas slowly filled the room. The guard's name was Kwon Hyuk, and he claimed he witnessed systematic human experimentation at Camp 22, one of North Korea's most secretive political prison facilities. But here's what makes this story different from every other North Korean horror tale you've heard. This wasn't just random cruelty. This was organized science. The allegations that emerged from multiple North Korean defectors paint a picture of state-sponsored human experimentation that would make Nazi doctors proud. But before we dive into the darkest corners of these claims, we need to understand what we're dealing with. This isn't a simple story of good versus evil. This is a complex web of testimonies, denials, and geopolitical implications that stretches from the 1970s to today. Let's start with what we know for certain. North Korea operates a network of political prison camps called Kwanliso. These aren't your typical prisons. They're massive facilities designed to hold entire families for generations. The United Nations Commission of Inquiry documented these camps in 2014, estimating they held between 80,000 to 130,000 prisoners. The conditions inside these camps constitute crimes against humanity. Starvation, torture, sexual violence, and public executions are routine. This part isn't disputed. The satellite images exist. The testimonies are consistent. The evidence is overwhelming. But then come the allegations that push this story into even darker territory. Multiple defectors have claimed that some of these camps weren't just sites of imprisonment and abuse, they were laboratories. The most detailed account comes from Kwon Hyuk, who presented himself as a former security chief at Camp 22. In 2004, he told BBC and Guardian reporters about glass-walled chambers where chemical agents were tested on prisoners. According to Kwon, entire families would be brought into these chambers. Scientists would observe from an adjacent room, taking notes as various gases were released. The families would be told they were being moved to better housing. They had no idea they were walking into an execution disguised as an experiment. Kwon's testimony was graphic and specific. He described how the victims would react to different chemical agents. Some would die quickly, others would suffer for hours. He claimed to have witnessed hundreds of these experiments over several years. The scientists, according to Kwon, were particularly interested in testing agents on children to see how their smaller bodies processed the chemicals differently than adults. But Kwon wasn't the only one making these claims. Lee Soon-ok, a former prisoner, testified before the U.S. Senate in 2002. She described being forced to watch as 50 female prisoners were given poisoned cabbage. All 50 died. Lee claimed this was presented as a test of a new poison that could be used against enemies of the state. Then there's the testimony of an anonymous senior North Korean chemist who spoke to the Los Angeles Times in 2004. This individual claimed to have witnessed gas chamber experiments near Pyeongseong in 1979. Unlike other testimonies, this person provided technical details about the chemical compounds used and described the layout of the observation rooms where scientists monitored the experiments. Another former guard, An Myung-chol, added even more disturbing details. He alleged that prisoners were used for surgery practice without anesthesia. Medical students and military doctors would perform operations on living prisoners to practice techniques they might need on the battlefield. The prisoners, according to An, were considered expendable training materials. Now, here's where this story gets complicated. These are serious allegations from multiple sources, but they exist in a landscape where independent verification is impossible. North Korea doesn't allow international observers into these facilities. The country denies these camps even exist, despite satellite evidence to the contrary. So, we're left with testimonies from defectors, and defector testimonies have their own complex history. Some details from these accounts have been questioned over the years. South Korean intelligence analysts have noted inconsistencies in certain testimonies. The UN Commission of Inquiry, while documenting systematic abuses in the prison camp system, did not independently verify the human experimentation allegations due to lack of access and the high evidentiary threshold they maintained. But dismissing these allegations entirely would be a mistake, and here's why. North Korea has a documented history with chemical weapons that makes these claims far from impossible. The country never joined the Chemical Weapons Convention. Most nations banned chemical weapons decades ago. North Korea chose not to participate in this global treaty. They did join the Biological Weapons Convention in 1987, but U.S. intelligence assessments suggest they may not be in compliance with their obligations under that treaty. More importantly, North Korea has demonstrated a willingness to use chemical weapons in the modern era. In 2017, Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, was assassinated at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The weapon used was VX, one of the most deadly nerve agents ever created. Two women approached Kim Jong-nam and smeared the substance on his face. He was dead within minutes. Malaysian authorities officially attributed this assassination to North Korea. The precision and effectiveness of the attack demonstrated that North Korea not only possesses sophisticated chemical weapons, but has trained operatives who know how to use them. This doesn't prove the prison camp allegations, but it establishes capability and intent. If you're going to develop chemical weapons, you need to test them. The question becomes, where and on whom? For a regime that treats political prisoners as less than human, the answer becomes disturbingly logical. The timeline of these allegations also fits with North Korea's broader weapons development programs. The earliest reported experiments date to 1979, right around the time North Korea was beginning to seriously develop its unconventional weapons capabilities. The programs allegedly continued through the 1990s, coinciding with North Korea's expansion of its chemical weapons stockpile. There's also the matter of North Korea's medical ethics, or lack thereof. This is a country where defectors report that disabled children are often killed at birth to maintain genetic purity, where political prisoners are worked to death in mines and factories, where 3 generations of a family can be imprisoned for one person's alleged political crime. In this context, using prisoners for medical experimentation isn't a leap from existing practices, it's a logical extension of them. The international legal framework makes these allegations even more serious. If proven, these experiments would constitute multiple crimes against humanity. Murder, torture, persecution, and other inhumane acts are all covered under international criminal law. The UN Commission of Inquiry has already called for North Korean leaders to be referred to the International Criminal Court for the documented abuses in the prison camp system. Human experimentation would add additional charges to that potential case. But here's what makes this story particularly troubling in 2024. North Korea's weapons programs have only grown more sophisticated. Their nuclear program has advanced dramatically. Their missile technology can now reach targets anywhere in the world. If they were conducting human experimentation in the 1980s and 1990s to develop chemical and biological weapons, what might they be doing now? The defector testimonies suggest these programs weren't just about developing weapons for external use. Some of the alleged experiments focused on crowd control agents and methods for suppressing internal dissent. In other words, North Korea may have been using prisoners to perfect the tools needed to maintain their own power. This connects to a broader pattern of North Korean behavior. The regime doesn't just commit atrocities randomly. Every act of cruelty serves a purpose. Public executions send a message. Prison camps eliminate dissent across generations. If human experimentation occurred, it would have been part of the same calculated approach to maintaining control. The testimonies also reveal something about the psychology of the perpetrators. According to the defectors, the scientists and guards involved in these alleged experiments didn't see the prisoners as human. They were referred to as materials or subjects. This dehumanization made the experiments psychologically possible for those carrying them out. This mirrors the language used by other regimes that have conducted human experimentation throughout history. The Nazi doctors called their victims subjects. Japanese Unit 731 referred to prisoners as logs. North Korean scientists allegedly called them materials. The terminology reveals the mindset necessary to commit these acts. But beyond the historical parallels, these allegations have modern implications. If North Korea developed chemical and biological weapons through human experimentation, those weapons still exist. The knowledge gained from that research is still available to the regime. The scientists who allegedly conducted these experiments may still be alive and working. The international community's response to these allegations has been complicated. Documenting crimes that occurred in complete secrecy in a country that denies international access creates enormous challenges. The testimonies are consistent in their broad outlines, but specific details sometimes conflict. Some defectors have been found to exaggerate other aspects of their experiences, which calls into question their credibility on these allegations. Yet the pattern of testimonies, combined with North Korea's demonstrated chemical weapons capabilities and complete disregard for human rights, keeps these allegations in the realm of credible concern rather than dismissed claims. The UN Commission of Inquiry took a careful approach. They documented what could be verified while noting what could not be independently confirmed. This created a historical record of systematic abuses, while acknowledging the limitations of the evidence regarding specific allegations like human experimentation. For families of victims, this careful approach offers little comfort. If their relatives died in gas chambers disguised as experiments, the lack of conclusive proof doesn't bring them back or provide justice. For policymakers, it creates a dilemma about how to respond to serious allegations that can't be definitively proven. The story of North Korea's alleged human experimentation programs reveals the challenges of documenting atrocities committed by closed regimes. It shows how the absence of access can leave victim stories in a gray zone between credible testimony and verified fact. What we know for certain is that North Korea continues to operate political prison camps where systematic abuses occur daily. What we can't prove is whether those camps were used as testing sites for weapons that the regime continues to develop and refine. But in 2023, satellite imagery revealed construction of new facilities at several prison camp locations, structures that don't match the typical prison infrastructure, buildings with specialized ventilation systems and reinforced walls. The question isn't whether North Korea committed these crimes in the past. The question is whether they're still happening today, and what new horrors those fresh concrete structures might contain.